Get ready for the 6th annual Motor City Metrics MLB Draft Show. Hosted by your very own Chris Brown and Rogelio Castillo, we're exploring one of the deepest MLB drafts in recent memory. Who will rise for the pack? Will the Detroit Tigers secure an impact bat with their pick? This is the first draft in the Scott Harris era, and you don't want to miss it. Be part of the excitement and witness the future of baseball unfold on the Motor City Metrics MLB Draft Show. Join us Sunday, July 9th on the Motor City Metrics YouTube channel and the Tiger Minor Report YouTube channel for the first round of coverage.
Well, it certainly seems this week in the Tiger minor league system, there's been quite a bit of news, quite a bit of activity, and the Erie Bats have been just decimating pitching. But the reason why if you look down on our lower left screen, if you're watching us on YouTube and if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, first and foremost, thank you. By the way, we had our best month ever and in terms of download. So thank you for participating. Thank you for sending us questions. Really appreciate that. But if you're watching Jack O'Loughlin pitching here through the cottonwood that's floating around in Great Lakes, we almost got nailed there. The reason why I pulled this start is because Great Lakes has one of the best offenses in the league, and he just got promoted to Toledo, Chris. And so we were speculating whether or not this was a org move or because Toledo's rotation has been just getting pummeled, first by Rochester, now Indianapolis, over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's June 1st. And so we've talked about this before. The Tigers traded Jonathan Davis because they thought there was an opt-out. I think the Toledo Mud Hens pitching staff has been really kind of strange all year long. They haven't had many guys go deep into any starts. And it's almost been like a small army of short and long relievers there. But I think that we've got some Mud Hen veterans probably opting out. I haven't seen any word on that yet, but you just look at, so you got Jack O'Loughlin getting called up from West Michigan, but you also have who else got called up? Billy Lesher got called up to Toledo from Erie. Chavez Fernando got called up from West Michigan to Toledo. So it feels like they're trying to backfill some arms there. And what we know that Reese Olson's coming up to make his MLB debut tomorrow on Friday. And so the Mud Hens need somebody who can meet some innings. And O'Loughlin has been pitching very well in West Michigan. And it's kind of like, all right, he's the best option for them right now.
Bristol did come up, do 2 innings of work, and do what he had to do. But as far as what the Tigers are concerned with guys like Flores, guys like Ty Madden, AA, maybe perhaps don't want to break him up. But if you're wondering why O'Loughlin, it's simple. He's been pretty effective over the last 25 innings of work. He's been one of the best pitchers outside of another lefty, Brent Hurdler, in the system. And he's got up to 95, 96, according to Dan Hasty, the Whitecaps announcer. And so he's been going in and out of his zone pretty effectively. Strikeout stuff is a little up, but he's not really a strikeout guy. But that ERA, but the walks, the most important stat right there, Chris, the walks are significantly down than they were from last year.
Yeah, he's so he was a guy who signed when he was 16 years old. He's out of Adelaide, Australia, which is the opposite coast from Sydney, if you're just wondering. And he signed in the same international class as Winslow Perez. And so he's been around the system forever. It just kind of feels like he's finally putting things together. And he's always had a pretty good feel for his breaking ball. But he's a big kid, 6'5", 225, 235. And he's gotten more coordinated and more direct to the plate. So he's throwing more strikes and then more quality strikes. And the fastball is decent. The changeup is kind of fringy. But he's a guy who can go up to Toledo and probably survive for a little bit. It's not, but as we're saying, like I feel like they didn't want to disrupt Erie's rotation that much. And it may simply just be that O'Loughlin's, turn through the rotation kind of lines up best with Olson's. Rather than, I don't bring it up Montero or Madden or Flores or one of those guys. And I was saying earlier, I thought it might have been Sawyer Gibson Long who would get this call because he kind of feels like the elder statesman there in Erie, but he didn't make his last start. He was supposed to start last Sunday and he didn't. And I don't know what's going on with him, if he's hurt, if he's sick or whatever. So they kind of, go down to the next one. And the next one is Jack O'Loughlin. And as we're saying after this, I don't know how long he'll be in Toledo. It could be a one-start thing. It could be 2 or 3. But my guess is then after he's done in Toledo, they'll send him to Erie rather than back down to West Michigan. So it's still kind of a promotion. It's just kind of a layover in Toledo on his way to Erie, if you will.
Yeah, because it makes sense. I mean, at some point, you're going to see a corresponding move from Erie to Toledo or Erie to Detroit at some point, based off a couple of factors. One being that Justyn-Henry Malloy is starting to play the outfield, and with the injury to Riley Green, which we'll be discussing further on the Motor City Metrics podcast, you have Riley Green, you have Eduardo Rodriguez going down with an injury, you have Tarek Skubal, who's going to be back soon, but it's going to probably be a few more weeks, if not probably. You're hoping by the end of the month at least they can hold out enough for the Tigers pitching. And then you have Winfield Perez, who moved to the outfield. We talked about that on Sunday. So you would have to make a move to add Malloy to the 40-man. In addition, you do have Parker Meadows. You have
Winfield Perez.
Wow. Yeah. You have Winfield Perez. You have Winfield Perez and Parker Meadows both on the roster, and Perez going to the outfield. Chris, he's looked serviceable out there at best, but then we can't ignore the elephant in the room, and as one, Mr. Colt Keith, who has been starting at second. So it's a prelude to things to come that potentially he could go to Toledo and maybe, just maybe, would hit Detroit by the end of the summer. Just a possibility.
Yeah, it feels kind of like it's moving season, if you will. Like, just things are happening in the minor league system. We've talked about Laughlin and Link here, but you have, for the first time all year, they let 2 guys pitch into the 6th inning yesterday. They let Brant Hurd do it in Erie. He threw 94, 95 pitches and looked pretty good again. So he's a guy that, as you discussed, maybe moving up to Toledo. He would probably be my choice right now, and then Laughlin would backfill there in Erie. And then they had Garrett Burhan pitch 6 innings for West Michigan. And so they're we talked about it before. The first month it was only 4 innings for everybody, and then in May it was 5 innings, and now they're loosening the reins at 6 innings. I think at least probably till the end of the year. So we've seen that they're getting some of these guys prepared, and then the other thing is, they're moving guys around, and we've seen this a ton in Detroit. That they love their roster versatility up there, and even Toledo, right? Like Heidler, Lipkiss, those guys are playing all over the place when they're there. But yeah, I think it's in preparation for these guys to make their way to the bigs. Part of it is, you want Colt Keith to get, and he's played second base before, so you just want to get him, familiar with that again for his inevitable call up to Toledo, so that Malloy and Keith can both be on the field at the same time. But you don't want him to play exclusively second base because he might be a third baseman in the big leagues, and so you don't want Malloy to play exclusively outfield because he might be a third baseman in the big league. So they're just getting these guys more acclimated to those positions. Malloy has played outfield in Atlanta, and I think he played exclusively outfield once he moved to Double-A last year. So, yeah, it's just more about getting these guys ready for their inevitable call-ups. And with Malloy, it would be the call-up to the big leagues, and Keith, it's call-up to Triple-A and possibly to the big leagues too, because, what he did in May was kind of absurd.
Yeah, so if you're wondering what he did in the month of May, he batted .374 with 6 home runs, drove in 27, had 10 walks of 23 strikeouts, and was just, in the last, let's see here. So if I go back since May 20th, since May 20th, that goes a span of 8 games. During that 8 games, Chris, 6 of those 8 games were multi-hit games.
I think 7 of his last 12. Yeah, like it's the second half of May. He's just like, I'm just going to hit everything. They had that 6-hit game in there. He's had multiple 3-hit games. Yesterday was a 2-hit game. The kid can hit. The kid is just a hitter. I think he'll be able to hit big league pitching. Maybe not from Jump Street, right? Like it'll take him a little while, but he's got the ability to do it, and he's got the ability to hit some power too. So he could be a very nice addition to Detroit's lineup within the next 2 months, even if it feels like the sort of thing. I remember back in the day, Cameron Maben, a long time ago, right? It was like 2007, I think 2008 maybe. Cameron Maben was tearing up West Michigan, and they took him up to Erie, and he went absolutely bonkers for like 10 days. They're like, all right, let's come up to the big leagues. Like sometimes they're just like, all right, why are we wasting these at bats down in the minors? That doesn't mean that Keith will come up and crush things, but it wouldn't shock me if he goes from Erie to Toledo in really as like a bonkers 2 weeks. We've seen even guys who aren't high ranking prospects, like Corey Joyce. Corey Joyce, every time he goes to Toledo, just turns into like a monster. I don't know if it's better lighting or what it is that you can smell the big leagues, or maybe it's just the kind of pitching you see in AAA versus what you see in AA. But I don't think it's going to be much of an issue for Colt Keith. And if he goes and destroys AAA, what's to keep them from bringing him up to Detroit?
Maybe it's all that Tony Pacos.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Delicious sausage is always good for baseball hitters
and dumplings too. And by the way, shout out to Robert James on Twitter at Confusion Rain. And when last night I put the last two players from the infield. I have to specify this because people were trying to say Justin Verlander. I understood that Tony Giordano and Alex Avila are among the last two who have played in the infield. I got the call straight from Erie to Detroit, skipping Toledo. And I said, I can't recall a player the Tigers have had who have dominated like this in their first year in AA. So Robert James did the math for me into the history, and then he goes, well, let's go to the tape. And I was proven correct. And not because it's not a victory parade, but this is an interesting stat here. So Colt Keith, 329 slash line, 329, 399, 576 with a WRC plus of 161. You heard me correctly, 161. Riley Green, 298, 381, 525, 145 WRC plus. Spencer Torkelson, just to give you an example, 263, 373, 560, 148 WRC plus. And then a name I haven't heard in a long time, Jordan Litterton, 269, 386, 469 WRC plus of 130. So Quincy Laporte's down there, but he was at this point was like 27, 28 years old. So we're going to count him, of course, but still, we're seeing dominance. We're seeing a guy who has been seeing the ball all year long very well. And it sounds like we're, if we're maybe too excited about Colt Keith, but Chris, I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, we saw Green sometimes struggle in the Erie. Sometimes we would have some really bad at bats. I mean, it's typical of any player, but Colt Keith, sometimes we saw that early on. We saw that, I think, when we went to the home series too. I think we saw Keith take a couple bad at bats.
Yeah,
but
he wasn't locked in yet. He was swinging at pitches above the zone a little bit too much and hitting pop-ups when he did hit the ball in play. And one of those pop-ups ended up being like an infield double, which was kind of funny. But yeah, he's locked in now. He's not chasing as much of the zone. He's still a very aggressive hitter. He doesn't expand a ton, but if you throw him a ball in the strike zone, he's going to swing at it for the most part. And he's going to hit it pretty hard. Yesterday, there was an 0-2 pitch from a lefty. He caught a fastball up and away from him and just a screaming line drive right over the third baseman's head. He's just got terrific barrel control. And we're excited because he's a hitter. And the Tigers, like you think like Nick Castellanos, kind of like this. Isaac Paredes had a really nice 5-week debut in Erie when he was 19, I think. But beyond that, like Riley Green took off after his first 2 months in Erie. Then he really picked things up and was able to get promoted to Toledo eventually. So, but yeah, that's basically what we're seeing. We're seeing what we saw from Colt Keith last year. That second month of the season, he just goes nuts. Now, last year it ended with an unfortunate injury. Otherwise, he would have been in Erie probably by July. And who knows? He might be in the big leagues right now. But yeah, and then here we've got him playing some little second base defense that we put together because, we thought people might like to get a look at him because he's not built like a traditional second baseman, right? He's kind of big and muscular. Although we have talked about him slimming down a little bit this year to show more range, but he's got, when he's on the move, he's got pretty good hands. There's times when he can let the ball kind of play him and then it'll bounce out of his glove. He's turning a double play here.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was one of the cold days from last year.
Yeah, these are all highlights from last April or early May because again he got injured. But you see, like, yeah, he's going to be perfectly passable at second base. I think you worry a little bit about the double play turns and footwork around the bag. But we see these guys. It's not like they get to the big leagues and stop working on this stuff, right? We've seen Spencer Torkelson take hundreds of little ground balls with his tiny mitt at first base like every day because this is their job. They get better. So I think Colt Keith is certainly athletic enough to handle second base. I don't know if he's going to be, average or above average, but he can survive there against maybe like a righty heavy lineup. You put Colt Keith at second base, and there you go. You're getting his bat in the lineup. Now look at this throw.
That's awesome, right there.
We actually have a replay of this one because so it's a slow motion. He's ranging behind second base.
No.
Basically, a turnaround jump throw strike from 120 feet away. So there's some physical tools there. It's all about the bat, but he's not a nothing.
Yeah, and that's where the reason why it was important to show this is because there was a limited sample size because he was out by mid-May, that injury?
I want to say early June.
Early June, yeah. And the Tigers have had a series of bad news this week. We mentioned earlier Erod it's going to be out for at least 3 or 4 starts. Somebody wanted to correct me on Twitter. I just said at least a start, but again, I was also I don't know if I know we had so many doctors on Twitter apparently, but I was also just making sure that I had the correct information that you at least missed a start. But I mean, to the extent of how many, anyway, it doesn't matter. But Riley Green with the stress fracture, and the Tigers found a way to win on Wednesday against the Rangers, and so. But Keith is a guy who's been mashing, and you have to at this point you have to be creative. I think under Al Avila, I'm not going to do the what if under Al Avila thing, but if there's one thing that Detroit has been able to do this year that we've not seen in the past is be creative. In terms of the Jake Martzik signing, he comes out yesterday, has like 7 or 8 putouts, goes in with a pair of hits. Who saw that coming? I mean, I don't know what Jake was doing on Monday, but I'm sure he wasn't expecting to be in Detroit by Wednesday. And
I think he was with the White Sox. But
was he with the White Sox or was he down in Charlotte?
I think he was. Yeah, I mean, he was in the White Sox organization, but I do think he probably was in Charlotte. Like, yeah, they wanted. So Vierling went down with injury. They wanted another right-handed hitting outfielder. So Marisnick out there. White Sox weren't going to do anything with him, so they paid however much cash considerations is. And yeah, he came up big with a couple opposite field singles. He's a guy who's been in the big leagues for a long time because he's got really good tools. He's never been a very consistent hitter. And but they just need bodies right now. They need outfielders. They need somebody who can go get it in center field, that he can do that. So it's like I've talked before about. I feel like so much of the season has been like, hey, why are we still playing scope? Why are they paying them and stuff? And I feel like basically Christopher Ilitch is not willing to eat a bunch of salary if he thinks the Tigers aren't going to win a bunch of games anyway. If that makes any sense? Like, and Tigers, like any baseball team, have their own internal projections about how they expect to be this year. Like, oh, we think we might win 75 games, we might 65, something like that, and they adjust for everything that happens. And I'm sure it's basically Hinch's job and Scott Harris's job to try to extend that and make it closer to like, hey, we can actually stay afloat. Basically, hey, we can compete. We might be able to win 80 games. If we win 80 games, we might be able to win this terrible division. And at that point, you can go to Scott or Chris Ilitch and say, hey, I know we know you don't want to eat however much of the $7 million is left, but we need to get better because we think we actually have a chance. And I don't know when they can do that. It certainly doesn't help to lose your 2 best players in one day. But I mean, I think that's kind of why we haven't seen a lot of the moves that fans have been asking for. Is that I don't think Chris Ilitch wants to do anything unless he thinks they actually have a chance. And I think he needs Harris to come with him with sort of not concrete proof, but like projections that say they do have a chance, which is probably not there yet.
Yeah, like Jonathan Scope yesterday had a really bad game, in terms of just defensively, and people forget that he had a recent stretch of good 2 weeks of baseball, but
Yeah.
it was hardly mentioned at all. It's just like, get rid of him and Ibanez immediately and make this happen. And it's not that easy. I think that you look at those two in terms of major league experience. That's why they went with Marisic over somebody like Malloy, because he's been in the big leagues before. And if the Tigers are going to continue to win now and be competitive in a brutal schedule coming up, they're going to have to, again, is Malloy ready? I don't know. I see the struggles. He had a really rough month of May in terms of at the plate. He's been striking out a lot more than he normally has, and teams are kind of figuring him out a little bit. However, on the flip side of things, you could sit there and say something like along the lines of, well, look at Will Vest. He struggled, but it's different with pitching.
Yeah, and it could be, hitters are humans. Malloy could be feeling like, I was playing really well in April and they didn't give me a chance and now I'm struggling. And it's like, maybe it's in his head. Maybe he just needs to be feeling like he's in the big leagues again. Maybe like, when he was there at the first of the season, he thought he'd be like, I'm on my way. And suddenly he wasn't on his way. He's like, oh. So maybe he gets the big leagues and hits again. We're going to see him, I think, at some point this year. So it's just, I think fans treat every single game like it's the entire season, basically. And front offices work on like a geological scale. They're like, oh, that was the Ibanez era, and now we're moving into the, like, they have to have a long view and they have to not overreact to everything that happens in every single game. Sometimes you have to react to events in the game, but that's usually only when something really bad goes wrong, like when Javi Baez got pinched. But most of the time, the front office is a little bit more patient and measured with stuff, and it's just that doesn't fit well with the average fan mentality of this guy made an error, get him off my team.
Yeah, because if that was the case, then there'd be half the roster would be turned over at this point, honestly. And
it's always it's always you're kind of guessing. We talked about it a lot with Cameron Candelario. Like, what he did last year was not good enough to justify being on the team, really. But you had to go, okay, he has some track record. Do we think it's worth it? Do we think it's worth it? And they ultimately go, no. And then this year he's improved. He's playing good baseball again. And it's like, well, was that a mistake, or we just have to move on? Sometimes you make mistakes, but sometimes you hold on to guys for way too long. We've seen that a lot with the Tigers for the last few years.
Yeah, and I'm just look, at least they're trying. They're doing the much they can. They're trying different things to continuously flip the roster, if you will, and try their hardest to keep the team competitive, and that's all you can ask for at this point. And the thing is that I know the fans are impatient right now with the way things are, but right now the Tigers are scrapping together, and I hate using those kind of cliches. And everybody wants Zach McKinstry in the All-Star team, which he's done a really good job, and again he's becoming a folk hero, which is, it's always like Tiger fans always find a way to do this, and admittedly it's always been, if it wasn't Don Kelly, we're going to see somebody write a blog about how great Zach McKinstry is and how much of a legend he's going to be, which is fine because he's done a really good job. He had a really good assist yesterday, right? Played the ball off the wall perfectly and was able to forgot who he gunned down at second base. But nevertheless, these narratives, you're talking about these narratives and chapters, that's part of the whole entire long part of the season. And so they needed, and you know what, quite frankly, a story like McKinstry, the Tigers were due for something like that to happen.
Yeah, it's that's the sort of Scott Harris's move so far, right? Like that's his big one to say, hey, okay, maybe he has some idea, because that was a guy that by any available public measure was not, heading for success this year. He was awful in spring training, hadn't been terribly good, in the big leagues with the Dodgers. But they said, hey, his numbers in AAA were really good. And everybody's like, yeah, whatever, AAA. Well, they saw something, and we talked about it before. It might have been a sweet spot, that he gets the barrel on the ball. But he's playing really well for now, and it does feel like a small victory for the Tigers. If he keeps it up, then hey, yeah, you've got yourself a piece for the future. But we see baseball players do this sort of thing all the time. Sometimes guys are hot for a month or hot for 2 months, and then it cools off. Or sometimes they're just good baseball players and they stay good. Just kind of have to cross your fingers with McKinstry. But I don't know. The only other thing I suppose we should talk about is Reese Olson, right? Making his big league debut tomorrow. It's fun. It's always fun to see a guy make his big league debut. I'm not terribly optimistic about how it's going to go because, and that has nothing to do with Reese Olson's ability. It has more to do with, boy, like 90% of guys making their big league debut struggle. Remember Joey Wentz had a really rough debut and then came back and was good before struggling again. So I don't know. He's got the stuff to pitch in the big leagues, but he's just got to put it in the right spot or else he's going to get hit really hard.
Yeah, over his last 3 starts, he's been very effective and kind of figured things out a little bit. He's using his changeup quite a bit more. This is his May 20th start against Omaha, where he got 15 swings and misses, and the swing rate, call strike swing rate was 50% on that changeup, which has been get some really good darting action on it. So that's against a team like Chicago, who's really kind of aggressive at the plate. It'll be interesting to see how he faces a guy like Tim Anderson, where Tim Anderson just hammers everything Tiger pitching wise. And so what's nice about this is they're going to have some sort of a scouting report on Olson, but if you could keep the ball down and away like you can in this start, I mean, here alone, just setting up his changeup pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 big things I've seen, his changeup is his best pitch. It's arguably the best changeup in the entire organization, maybe behind Lang's, maybe, I don't know, you want to say Lorenzen, but it's a really good changeup. He's not afraid to throw it to right-handers. He's not afraid to throw it 2-3 times in a row to anybody. So I'm really interested to see how they have him pitch in the big leagues because his fastball is his worst pitch. It's 95 miles an hour and get up to 97, but it just gets pummeled usually. He doesn't miss bats with it for the most part. And so I'm really curious to see if they, try to keep him from using that a ton and stick with the changeup and slider and curveball. Because the other big thing I think in his last couple starts is the slider location is much better. Early in the year, it's a high spin, 3,000 RPM breaking ball. So is his curveball. Like his stuff, there's nothing wrong with his stuff. But he would spin it and kind of leave it right over the heart of the zone. Kind of what Jackson Jobe was doing a little bit last year in the minors, where it moves a lot and spins a lot, but if you're not locating it, that doesn't really help you. And so he's been doing a good job, Olson has, of locating it low and away the right-handed hitters. And so I'd like to see more of that. But there's plenty to work with here. It's just a matter of locating because big league hitters don't miss a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, this is his starts heading in this prior to these last 3 starts he's been having. It's been really command with him. That's been the issue. Some of his stuff has looked really good, but just sequencing and just it has been kind of a thing with him where he will have a really good, again, his first, when he goes up against somebody at first, it's first batter, 3 or 4 pitches, but then the next batter, for whatever reason, would be 11, 13, 14 pitch at bat where they're battling and end up being either making hard contact somewhere or they walk. And it hasn't been the case recently.
Yeah, I think there was also an element of he was getting hit so hard that then you start nibbling, right? You're trying. It's tough. It's a tough balancing act where you don't want to throw it down the middle. But then if you're trying to, throw it too far out of the zone and get guys to chase, then suddenly they're walking and then you get yourself in more trouble. So I don't know. It's good to see him improve after those early struggles. It was looking really rough there for a while. And, but yeah, you always feel kind of happy for guys making the big league debut. So that'll be exciting. And kind of, hold out hope that he can give them 4 or 5 innings and look solid.
Especially if you're going to have hopefully Hinch has done a really good job. Case in point with Joey Wentz's start on Wednesday against the Rangers, where Wentz was kind of hanging in there against a very good Texas team, but he has curveball working and very effectively. And so it'll be interesting. There'll be probably short leash on Olson, especially with against the White Sox, who they're a familiar opponent with, but they also have to Monday when they come back, they have the Braves coming down. So it's not going to get any easier for Detroit.
No, it's a tough month for them. This is going to be a really challenging month. You've lost your best hitter for who knows how long, maybe 2 months, maybe the whole year, unfortunately. And you lost your best pitcher for at least one start, according to the Twitter doctors, but probably 4 or 5. Generally, you don't rupture things in your hands and come back from it. But I don't know, maybe he can throw nothing but palm balls and not use his fingers. Fingers are usually kind of important in pitching, but who knows? So, yeah, it's going to be a tough month. They're going to have to survive it. As you said, there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel with Skubal and Manning and Turnbull, and Carpenter's going to be coming back soon. Meadows will be coming off the IL, theoretically. So some help on the way, but these next few weeks are going to be a real challenge.
Palm ball, by the way, the last Tiger to throw a palm ball, Joe Bolivar. Remember him?
No.
Joe
Bolivar?
You don't remember Joe Bolivar?
No, I remember. Was it Frank Tanana? I remember Frank Tanana tried the hesitation pitch and like spring training in like 1987 or 89 or whatever. Like they're like, yeah, he's trying it. He would like start pitching and then stop and then throw again. And they're like, they let him do it in spring training. They're like, no, that's a balk every time. What are you doing, Frank? But yeah, palm ball.
Yeah, he threw a palm ball. I'm trying to find him right here. I'm trying to find a quick picture of him. But yeah, he was a journeyman starter that bounced around between Atlanta, Philly. It was one of those veterans the Tigers would take a flyer on. But yeah, here he is. This is Joe Bolivar. And there's a good story in Saber. It talks about him because this is when the Indians just teed off on the Tigers on a regular basis. But yeah, so he threw a palm ball. That was his main pitch, and he pitched for the Tigers for a couple seasons before he went and ended his career with the Pirates. But yeah, that was the last Tiger pitcher.
It's just a changeup. It's just a different grip. The primary changeup we see now is the circle change, where you put it in your palm and then you have to circle to part a little bit of that fading.
Or the Vulcan one.
Vulcan is probably the more or a split change, if you will.
Yeah.
And the palm ball, like Jim Palmer, I think threw the palm ball. Like it was a it's a changeup that I think it should be straighter, but it still has the velocity separation and looks like a fastball. But in any event, Eduardo Rodriguez is not going to be doing that. I was joking because he hurt his finger.
But the ruptured finger thing was it didn't sound exactly. It sounded painful, in other words. So well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you want to check out everything else on our website, go to tigersmlreports.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Tigers Minor League Report or Motor City Metrics. And for all great original content, go to those two channels. Or if you also want to help us out and go to our patreon.com/Tigers Minor League Report. And we just had Jerry post a player profile article on there exclusively only on the Patreon. And we have a couple articles coming out here as well. So I'll be doing a kind of a piece on what life after Riley Green, depending on what happens with the farm system. And Chris has got an outfield piece and what to expect from Reese Olson. Correct?
Reese Olson one will be up tomorrow. I got the outfield draft piece is out right now. And then I'm going to do just a quick recap of our top 25, how they did statistically in May, because, rather than I considered if we should do another re-ranking, but it feels a little too soon. So just look at some statistical performances and see how guys did that month. And random note, I just saw that outfielder Cole Calhoun has exercised his opt-out with the Yankees, so he might be on the market there for the Tigers if they want another lefty outfielder. But anyway, probably be a lot of guys opting out right now.
Yeah, because they're probably choosing the right time. And right now, hopefully the Tigers could pick up a veteran pitcher to supplement, because right now they need starters so bad. And again, when Skubal will come back, we'll see. But there is some good progress with that. So for myself and Chris, we'll talk to you next time.